Dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namah. Asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate. Let us pray to Him to remove all our suffering, to remove all darkness, to lead us to light. Let us pray to Him that we may overcome all the obstacles in our spiritual path. In the chapter 24, which we had concluded, Sri Ramakrishna gave significant instructions to Pandit Shashadhar, a great scholar. He was not a scholar of the academic type. He was a scholar of the worth. Sri Ramakrishna said he has discrimination. So, he has got some stuff. Because he had some stuff, Sri Ramakrishna came to him. Came to him not for no purpose. Came to him to bless him. Came to him to show his grace. Came to show him the light. Came to attract him towards him. All these things happened when Sri Ramakrishna met him. Next time, Shashidhar himself went to see Sri Ramakrishna. Tremendous attraction developed in the heart of Pandit Shashidhar. He was determined to do spiritual practice. No more lecturing. No more entering into any kind of debate. No more entertaining any doubts. No more slackening of spiritual practices. He became a very determined person, solid, devoted, sincere. Sri Ramakrishna, in the course of his instructions to him, said, sometimes God acts as the magnet and the devotee as the needle. If the needle is near the magnet, it is just drawn into the bosom of the magnet itself. If the magnet happens to come near the needle, immediately the magnet grabs the needle. That's what happened here. He is giving the example of magnet and needle. At the first meeting itself, he attracted him towards him. That is the divine attraction. See, Ramakrishna is that divine magnet. Those are fortunate who come near Sri Ramakrishna so that they will be attracted by him. They will get their life fulfilled, life's ambition of seeing God. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling him, God acts as the magnet and devotee as the needle. God attracts the devotee to himself. Again, sometimes the devotee acts as the magnet and God as the needle. It's a very significant teaching. Such is the attraction of the devotee that God comes to him, unable to resist his love. The devotee develops such tremendous love towards God, immediately God comes to him. God coming to the devotee. So here God is assuming the form of needle, and the devotee who has developed such tremendous love has become magnet. Sri Ramakrishna gave the example of magnet and the needle to illustrate his teachings on divine love. So, the natural attraction between God and the soul is like between the magnet and the needle. The soul is constantly drawn away from worldliness by God. What is Maya? It is nothing but summing up the whole Maya in just 2 words. Sri Ramakrishna says lust and gold. Lust and gold. Kama Kanchan. Because the mind is stuck up in this lust and gold, it is very miserable. Only when the mind is freed from this lust and gold, one attains yoga. So, the Supreme Self is called Paramatma. The individual self is called Atma. Yoga means Atma uniting with the Paramatma. the individual self experiences the state of yoga when it is attracted by Supreme Self to itself. There are a very few who feel this kind of attraction. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatadamapi siddhanam kaschin mam veti tattvataha. Lord Krishna says in the Gita, 1 in several thousand take the spiritual path. 1 in several thousand, those who have taken spiritual path will reach me. So how it is filtered out? That means very few. You can number them. Those few are extraordinary few. But how the people think about them? They think them to be abnormal. Abnormal. Why? Because those few, they won't behave in the same way as the people at large behave. Sri Ramakrishna explains this. There is a needle. If it is thickly overlaid with mud, it is not attracted to the magnet. The stumbling block is the mud, thick layer of mud covering the needle, prevents the needle to be attracted by the magnet. So this analogy is applied to the individual self. This individual self, I am so and so, is thickly plastered with the mud of lust, anger, and greed. Kama, Krodha, Lobha. And other bad tendencies and inclinations to worldly pleasures as well. So these put the individual soul in such a way they don't feel natural divine attraction. So it means the majority of humanity is spiritually anti-magnetic. I am giving the example of magnetic needle, magnet and needle, so I am using these terms. Anti-magnetic. Actually, really speaking, it is they who are anti-magnetic are abnormal. Not those few who had come to divine were to be considered abnormal. It is not the extraordinary few abnormal, it is the vast majority of the people are abnormal. Well, Sri Ramakrishna compares man's temporal life to a voyage. One who keeps his mind always attuned to God will not lose his course and come to grief. Sri Ramakrishna refers to the mariner's compass. The magnetic needle always points to the north. Hence the sailing vessel doesn't lose its control. It doesn't lose its course. It goes in proper direction. So long as the heart of man is directed towards God, he cannot be lost in the ocean of worldliness. That means how important it is to direct our heart towards God. In another place, Sri Ramakrishna refers to the sea and the ship. But in this case, the ship passes over a submarine magnetic hill. When it is passing through that way, because it has come near the huge magnetic hill, all its screws, nuts, bolts got loosened, and finally it sank. The ship sank. In the same way, the soul loses his individuality and gets absorbed in the Supreme Self. Sri Ramakrishna said, the lodestone rock attracts the ship sailing over it, draws out all its nails, separates its planks, and finally sinks the vessel in the deep. Even so, when the human soul is attracted by the magnet of the universal consciousness, the latter destroys in a moment all its individuality and selfishness and sinks it in the ocean of God's infinite love. In one context, Sri Ramakrishna pictures the needle of the human soul pulled in opposite directions by two magnets. It's very interesting. Being pulled by two magnets. How many pulls we have to take care of in order to be attracted by the divine? On the one side, there's a tremendous pull, tremendous attraction. That is worldly attraction. Of the magnet of lust and gold. Hankering after worldly pleasures, not being satiated by the worldly objects. So that is one attraction. That's also considered as magnet, because the individual self is constantly pulled by that magnet of lust and gold. On the other is the magnet of God Himself. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells, God is a far bigger magnet, and so His attraction will prevail in the end. So what is needed is the devotee should develop intense love for God. When he does it, the needle magnet position becomes reversed. God becomes the needle, devotee becomes the magnet. Here, the devotee attracts God to him. God is the beloved of his devotee, and he is under his control. God, out of his infinite love, periodically comes down on earth and lives and moves among people is a well-established truth in religions. Otherwise, by this time, you would have completely forgotten even the word God. Because these incarnations have been coming now and then, and saints and sages are showing up here and there, somehow it is maintained. So God comes down to establish religion on a firm foundation. Sri Ramakrishna said that God wants, besides, to enjoy the love of his sincere devotees, and so comes down as man for this love banquet. It is just for this love of the devotees that God contracts himself into a human form and descends on earth to play his Leela. The incarnation of God exercises an extraordinary fascination on humanity. Men and women flock around him as iron filings cling to the magnet. You can study, you can see the lives of Buddha, Lord Christ, and many great holy people. Multitudes of people follow wherever they went. They hung on every word they spoke. If you study Sri Ramakrishna's life, it is full of incidents in which people felt a similar magnetic attraction in him. Just as some people are attracted by God and deeply love him, so too there are some others who terribly hate God. Vehemently they oppose God. How come they hate God, the embodiment of absolute love? The answer is repulsion is as much a characteristic of magnetism as attraction is. It is said, hatred is only negative love of love in reverse gear. They too reach him. After all, he is hating God. All the time he is hating God. In that process, all the time he is thinking about God. He too will reach him. Well, the process of magnetization has a great lesson for us. One mode of magnetizing is to rub or stroke a bar of either iron or steel with a strong magnet. The ferrous bar becomes a magnet. Similarly, by constantly associating with the holy, we also become holy and be devoted to God. So constant association. Living in the company of holy is very important, essential spiritual practice. Another way of magnetization is by induction. Magnetism can be produced when the piece of metal is laid parallel to a magnet, or in the north-south position, as the earth itself is a huge magnet. and tapped gently a number of times. This is similar to regular practice of japa and meditation. Steadfast spiritual practice, the magnet teaches, rouses the dormant divine love which draws his soul to the divine Lord. So, let us be aware of these facts. Let us clear the mud that is preventing our vision of God. The mud of worldly distractions. Clear off the mud, you will have the clear vision of God within your heart. He is always there, ever attracting the individual soul. However thick the mud might be, however hard and strong it might be, it must be broken, it must be destroyed. If necessary, you have to blast it by dynamite. That means sometimes strong, decisive measures are required to wipe out these worldly distractions from the mind. Anyway, everything is kept before us as in the open book. Let us try to follow what Sri Ramakrishna has said. Develop sincere love towards God. Everything will come by itself. It comes by itself. Page 476, chapter 25, we are reading. Better than reading is hearing, and better than hearing is seeing. One understands the scriptures better by hearing them from the lips of the Guru or of a holy man. Then one doesn't have to think about the non-essential part. Hanuman said, "Brother, I don't know how much about the phase of the moon or the position of the stars. I just contemplate Rama. But seeing is far better than hearing. Then all doubts disappear. It is true that many things are recorded in the scriptures, but all these are useless without the direct realization of God, without devotion to His lotus feet, without purity of heart. The almanac forecasts the rainfall of the year, but not a drop of water will you get by squeezing the almanac. No, not even one drop. How long should one reason about the texts of the scriptures? So long as one doesn't have direct realization of God. How long does the bee buzz about? As long as it is not sitting on a flower. No sooner does it light on a flower and begin to sip honey than it keeps quiet. But you must remember another thing. One may talk even after the realization of God. But then one talks only of God and of divine bliss. It is like a drunkard's crying victory to the Divine Mother. He can hardly say anything else on account of his drunkenness. You can notice too that a bee makes an indistinct humming sound after having sipped the honey from a flower. The Jnani reasons about the world through the process of neti neti, not this, not this. Reasoning in this way, he at last comes to a state of bliss, and that is Brahman. What's the nature of a jnani? He behaves according to scriptural injunctions. Once I was taken to Chanak and saw some sadhus there. Several of them were suing. All laugh. At the sight of us, they threw aside their sewing. They sat straight, crossing their legs, and conversed with us. But jnanis will not talk about spiritual things without being asked. They will inquire at first about such things as your health and your family. But the nature of the Vijnani is different. He is unconcerned about anything. Perhaps he carries his wearing cloth loose under his arm, like a child, or perhaps the cloth has dropped from his body altogether. The man who knows that God exists is called a Jnani. A Jnani is like one who knows beyond a doubt that a log of wood contains fire. But a Vijnani is he who lights the log, cooks over the fire, and is nourished by the food. The 8 fetters have fallen from the Vijnani. He may keep merely the appearance of lust, anger, and the rest. Pandit said, the knots of his heart are cut asunder, all his doubts are destroyed. Master, yes. Once a ship sailed into the ocean, suddenly its iron joints, nails, and screws fell out. The ship was passing a magnetic hill, and so all its iron was loosened. I used to go to Krishna Kishore's house. Once when I was there, he said to me, why do you chew betel leaf? I said, it's my sweet pleasure. I should chew betel leaf, look at my face in the mirror, and dance naked among 1,000 girls. Because the master was a Vijnani. Krishna Kishore's wife scolded him and said, what have you said to Ramakrishna? You don't know how to talk to people. In this state, passions like lust and anger are burnt up, though nothing happens to the physical body. It looks just like any other body, but the inside is all hollow and pure. A devotee said, asked, does the body remain even after the realization of God? Sri Ramakrishna replied, the body survives with some so that they may work out their prarabdha karma or work for the welfare of others. By bathing in the Ganges, a man gets rid of his sin and attains liberation. But if he happens to be blind, he doesn't get rid of his blindness. Of course, he escapes future births, which would otherwise be necessary for reaping the results of his past sinful karma. His present body remains alive as long as its momentum is not exhausted. The momentum of the actions of his previous birth, which has given rise to his present body. His present body remains alive as long as its momentum is not exhausted. But future births are no longer possible. The wheel moves as long as the impulse that has set it in motion lasts. Then it comes to a stop. In the case of such a person, passions like lust and anger are burnt up. Only the body remains alive to perform a few actions. Pandit, that's called samskara. Master, the Vijnani always sees God. That's why he is so indifferent about the world. He sees God even with his eyes open. Sometimes he comes down to the Leela from the Nitya, and sometimes he goes up to the Nitya from the Leela. Pandit said, I don't understand that. Master, the Jnani reasons about the world through the process of neti neti, and at last reaches the eternal and indivisible Satchidananda. He reasons in this manner: Brahman is not the living beings. It is neither the universe nor the 24 cosmic principles. As a result of such reasoning, he attains the absolute. Then he realizes that it is the absolute that has become all this: the universe, its living beings, and the 24 cosmic principles. Milk sets into curd, and the curd is churned into butter. After extracting the butter, one realizes that butter is not essentially different from buttermilk, and buttermilk not essentially different from butter. The bark of a tree goes with the pith, and the pith goes with the bark. Pandit smiling to Bhudar: did you understand that? It's very difficult. Master: if there is butter, there must be buttermilk also. If you think of butter, you must also think of buttermilk along with it, for there cannot be any butter without buttermilk. Just so, if you accept the Nitya, you must also accept the Leela. It is a process of negation and affirmation. You realize the Nitya by negating the Leela. Then you affirm the Leela, seeing in it the manifestation of the Nitya. One attains this state after realizing reality in both aspects, personal and impersonal. The personal is the embodiment of Chit, consciousness, and the impersonal is the indivisible Satchidananda. Shall stop here. Yes. What he? Hate. It's a negative. See, it is described in the scriptures in Bhagavad. Sometimes, if a person is hating a individual, he keeps on hating so much, all the time he'll be thinking about him. So, here if a person hates God, all the time he's thinking about God, every time trying to hate him vehemently. But in that process what happens? He reaches the ultimate through a process by which he will be made to realize God. For example, there are many incidents how the wicked people get salvation by the touch of God. Of course, we have to take examples from Mahabharata and Bhagavad and so on, where, see, if you study the life of Sri Krishna, you find there was a person, his name was Shishupal. From the time of his birth unto the last, he hated Krishna like anything. When it reached the climax, then Lord Krishna said in the assembly of all the kings, well, now the time has come for you to know your status Now the time has come to you to know who am I. Then he gives order to his discus to cut off the head of that person who was all through his life hating Krishna. From the point of the ordinary world, he killed that person who was very arrogant, very troublesome, and dangerous to the society. He was to be killed, and he could not be killed by anyone, only Sri Krishna should have to do it. So that is from the ordinary worldly person's judgment point of view. But then Sri Krishna tells, because he directly came, confronted Sri Krishna, though he hated him all through his life, he was liberated and his soul entered into his abode. It's actually, this episode has been very graphically described in the Bhagavad. How the light emanated from the dead body of the Shishupal, and it was coming, all the kings around, they were all seeing that light coming. It come and merged into Sri Krishna's form. So, like that, they give the example. He was not thinking of anything else, only he was thinking of Krishna all the time. But of course, he was not loving, he was hating him. But finally, he got liberated. That's the idea, they say. The scriptures give that example. It is just like this. One is reaching a place by going through right royal way. The other way is you can reach the same place by going through shortcut, passing through a dirty road. But you reach the same goal, though you are going through a dirty road. So, hating means it's a dirty, following a dirty path to reach God. That's the way. That's the way. But anyway, he will be purified, because by hating, by reaction, he has to pass through so many hurdles. He can't escape whatever the things he had done. So, in reaction, he will suffer vehemently, he will suffer severely, and he will finally come to God. That's the way. As I said earlier, Sri Ramakrishna is a divine magnet. God is a divine magnet. He is constantly attracting all the individuals towards himself. In whatever way they are going, they are all being drawn towards him. That's the truth. Whatever way they may be going, but they are all drawn towards him. Any question? Right, we shall stop. Adorable becomes very, very lovable to God. The main characteristic of a realized person is he is always peaceful and happy. And he always speaks about God. He always speaks about spiritual talks. He always gives spiritual talks. That is a characteristic of a realized person. He can't speak anything other than God. You take the example of Sri Ramakrishna himself. All through his life he was talking about God only. Whenever he speaks only spiritual ideas. Like that. And you feel a tremendous attraction towards such a person. You feel you are peaceful. You feel you get a very fine feeling if you come near him. All those things. You feel yourself purified. You feel reverence. These are all indications. The main characteristic of a person of realized is he's always peaceful, always cheerful, always 24 hours. And always meditative. That means even though he's talking, his mind is always in God. You can feel it. In fact, when I saw Yatishwanj, I used to all these characteristics I could see in him. He used to come out daytime. By 11 o'clock he would come out and move about in the ashram premises. He would speak to the devotees. Whoever comes, he would talk to them, etc., etc. Whenever he talked, it was natural. There was not unnatural in him. His eyes would be half closed when he talked. And he was talking about spiritual matters. You go at midnight, 2 o'clock, go to his room, see his face, very fine, pleasing, with a mild smile face. Even if he is sleeping, you feel, you see a mild smile on his face, even in sleep. Just by one look, by few words, they can attract anybody towards God. That was how I was drawn to spiritual life. Just by one look. That's the point. But you will understand it slowly, when you, as you purify yourself more and more, you will understand more and more glories of God. There is no end to the glories of God. It's Ananta, infinite. Alright, we shall stop.